Hello guys, welcome back to another Android Volley tutorial. Today we are going to learn about how to make a simple JSON array request using Volley. So here I am going to use a local host. Here I am going to use a WAMP server application. So the first thing I have to start WAMP server. So start WAMP server now. So here the green icon indicates that now WAMP server is ready. Now open your browser. On the address bar type localhost. This is the home page of WAMP server. Go to PHP myadmin. Here we have a database called contact.db, and that database contains a table called contact info. So this table has two columns, name and email, and here some data is already available in this table. Now we are going to create an Android application that fetch this information in the form of a JSON array and display that information in a recycler view. So we have to place a PHP script within the web server. So go to the installation folder of WAMP server. Here is the installation folder of WAMP server. Go to the root directory. Here we have a PHP script called contactinfo.php. So within this PHP script, first here I declare some variables like a username, password, host name and database name. And here is the statement that connect to the database. Here we use a function called MySQLi connect that contain arguments like host, username, password and database name. And here is the SQL query, and here is the statement that execute the SQL query. Here we use the function called MySQLi query, and here we have a variable called response. It is an array, and here we have a while loop, and this while loop iterates through each row of the result set, and here we fetch each of the row and save it inside the variable called row, and here we create the JSON object and we save each of the JSON object to an array. And here the JSON object has properties like name and email, and we save the JSON object to an array using a function called array push. And finally we encode the JSON array and return the result. Okay, so now the PHP script is ready. Now the server side is okay. Now we can start an Android application. So create a new project in Android Studio. So the first thing, you need to add the needed permissions inside Android manifest.xml. Here you need to fetch information from a remote server. So you have to add the internet permission. So add the needed permissions. Okay. Now we need to add the needed dependency inside the Gradle script file. So open your Gradle file and add the needed dependency. So first here I am going to add a dependency for using a recycler view. Here we use a material widget called recycler view. So you need to add a dependency for recycler view. So here is the recycler view dependency. Now you need to add the dependency for Volley library. Okay, now made a project sync. Okay, now the project sync finishes. Close this file. Now go to the activity main.xml and add a button into it. Change the text of the button into display list. Also change the ID of the button. I change it into BN. Okay. Now to display the list we need another activity. So create a new activity. Select an empty activity. specify an activity name. Here I name it as display list. Click finish. Okay, now the activity is created. Now go to the XML file. Okay, open main activity.java. Here declare some variables for button. I name it as button. Now initialize this variable button equal to, first typecast that one into button. Now find it, find the view by id r.id.bn. Okay, now specify a click listener for the button dot set on click listener. So from this on click method we have to start the newly created activity. So start activity and specify the intent, new intent, main activity dot this. Now specify the target activity. Here it is display list dot class. Okay, so now we can close main activity and the main layout file. So now we can set up the recycler view to display the list. So go to the XML file. First remove all these margins. Now within this layout we need to add a recycler view. So add a new recycler view. Specify the width as match parent, height into wrap content. Now specify an ID for this recycler view. So Android ID. I name it as recycler view. Okay, now go to display list.java. Declare some variables for a recycler view. Name it as recycler view. Now specify some adapter for a recycler view. Now specify the layout manager for a recycler view. Now we need to initialize these variables. First initialize the recycler view. First typecast into recycler view. Now find it r.id.recycler view. Now initialize the layout manager. Here we need a linear layout manager and pass the context this. Now set the layout manager for the recycler view. Recycler view dot set layout manager, and here it is layout manager. Now for improving performance we have to set has fixed size into true. This will improve the performance. Okay, so now we need to add a layout for the recycler view. We have to add a separate layout for each row of the recycler view. So create a new layout resource file and specify the file name as raw item. So here I add two text view. First one for name and second one for email. First one with ID name and second text view with ID email. So this layout represents each row of the recycler view. Okay, now we need to create some Java class. So create a new class. I name it as contact. Within this class create some variables, private string, name and email. Now specify getter and setter methods for these variables. To initialize these variables we need some constructor for this class. So add a constructor, public contact. For this constructor we need two arguments, string name and another string email. So from this constructor we have to call the setter method. So first call set name and pass the name parameter. Now set email and pass the email. Okay. So close this class. Now we need to add another class. This is for adapter of the recycler view. So I name it as recycler adapter. And this class extends recycler view adapter. And you need to implement some methods. So first here I am going to declare the view holder class, public static class. I name it as my view holder, and that extends view holder. Now you need to add a constructor for this class. Add a constructor. Okay. Now within this class, first here I am going to add an argument, a generic type for the class. So for this method on create view holder, the return type is an object of the view holder class. So here the return type is my view holder, and for this method on bind view holder, the first parameter is an object of the view holder. So here it is my view holder. Okay. Now here we have to declare some variables. Here we need an array list that handles some objects of contact class. I name it as array list equal to new array list. To initialize this array list we need a constructor for this adapter class. So public recycler adapter. And we need one parameter. It is an array list that contains some contact object. Now initialize the array list. So this dot array list equal to array list. Okay. So now from the get item count method, return the size of the array list. Array list dot size. Okay. Now within this view holder class we have to declare some view components. We have to declare two text views. So text view name and email. Now we have to initialize these variables from the constructor. So name equal to first typecast that one into text view, and you can use this view parameter item view dot find the view by id r dot id dot name. Now initialize the email text view. So email equal to typecast that one into text view item view dot find the view by id r dot id dot email. Okay. Now go to the on create view holder. Create some view object equal to layout inflator dot from parent dot get context dot inflate. Specify the row layout r dot layout dot row item. Now specify parent and one more argument, it is false. Okay. Now create an object of the view holder class. So my view holder, I name it as my view holder equal to new my view holder, and pass the view object as an argument. And finally return the view holder class from this method. Return my view holder. Now go to the on bind view holder. From this method we can assign values to the text view. So holder dot name dot set text. Okay. Now here we have to retrieve each of the contact class object from the array list. So array list dot get and pass the position, and now call the getter method from the contact class. First one is get name. So holder dot email dot set text, array list dot get and pass the position. Now get email. Okay. So now the adapter is ready. Close that file. Okay, now we finish the coding for recycler view. Now we can connect to the database. For that, create a class. I name it as background task. Background task. For this class, first we need some variables. It is a context. It is a context variable. Now create a constructor for this class. Create an array list. I name it as array list. New array list. To initialize these variables, we need a constructor for this class. So add a constructor public background task, and for this constructor we need a context variable. Now initialize the context variable. Okay. Now we have to create a method that connect to the database and get the Json array. So here the method return type is an array list that contain object of contact class, and the method name is get list. Okay. Now we need to connect to the remote server. So simply here return null. Okay, now we need to connect to the remote server and fetch the data in the form of an array list. Sorry, in the form of a JSON array. So we have to define a JSON array request. So first we have to specify the JSON URL. So create a string JSON URL equal to specify the server URL http colon, and here I am going to use a Genymotion virtual device, so I have to specify the IP address of this computer to access localhost. Here is my IP address. Now specify the PHP script name, PHP script file name, contact info.php. Contact info. Okay. So before going to use this URL, we can check this URL. So I copy this URL and open your browser and paste that URL on the address bar. So this is the response from server. This is a simple JSON array. So here the square brackets indicates a JSON array and curly brackets indicates, here the square brackets is JSON array and curly brackets indicates a JSON object. So here it is a single JSON array, and here each JSON object represents each row in the table, and each JSON object has properties like name and email. So this is the response from server. It is a JSON array. Okay, so now the URL is working fine. So now we can create some JSON array request. JSON array request. I name it as JSON array request equal to new JSON array request. First argument is the request method. Now specify the URL, server URL. Now specify the request body. Here we can use null. Now specify the response listener. And the last argument is the error listener. Okay, so here for the request body it needs some string value. So just simply typecast here into string. Okay. So now the JSON array request is ready. So we can we will get the response within this method called onResponse, and here only one parameter called the JSON array. So now I declare some variables int count equal to 0. Now we need to fetch each of the JSON object from the JSON array. For that, start a while loop and specify a condition count less than response.length. So now we need to fetch each of the JSON object from the JSON array. Here the JSON array name is response. So create some JSON object variable, JSON object. I name it as JSON object into. Now get each of the object response.get JSON object and pass the count variable. So here you need to add some try catch. Okay. Now we have to fetch each of the information from the JSON object and pass that information into the contact class. So create an object of contact class, contact equal to new contact. So you have to pass name and email. So JSON object dot get string and specify the key name. Now get the email, JSON object dot get email, get string email. Okay. So now we need to add each of the contact class object into the array list. So array list dot add contact. Now increment the counter value, count plus plus. Okay. And finally, we can return the array list from this method. Now, if there is an error happens, we have to display the error. So here display a toast, toast.makeTest, pass context. Now specify a message, error. Now specify duration for the toast. I make it into short. Now make it visible using show method. Now print stack trace of the error. Okay, so now the JSON array request is ready. Now we need to pass this JSON array request to the request queue. So here I'm going to create a singleton pattern. So create a new Java class for singleton pattern. I name it as my singleton. Okay. So within this class, first declare some variables, private static my singleton. I name it as m instance. Now we need some variables for request queue, private request queue. I name it as request queue. Now create a variable for context, private static context. I name it as mctx. So now I'm going to declare a variable that return a request queue object. So public, here the return type is request queue, and the method name is get a request queue. So here first check some condition. If request queue is null, in that case we have to initialize the request queue. So request queue is equal to volley dot new request queue and use the context mctx dot get application context. And finally return the request queue from this method, return request queue. Okay, now declare a constructor for this class. It's private my singleton. For this constructor we need one argument. It is a context variable. So initialize the context variable mctx is equal to context. Now initialize the request queue. Request queue is equal to get request queue. Okay. Now now I am going to define a method that return an instance of this class. So public static synchronized. It is a synchronized method, and here the return type is an instance of this class, and the method name is get instance. For this method we need one argument, one parameter. It is a context variable. So here check some condition. If m instance is null, in that case we have to initialize the instance. So m instance equal to new my singleton and pass the context, and finally return the instance from this method. Return m instance. Okay. Now we have to create a method for add each of the requests to the request queue. So public void add to request queue, add to request queue, and for this method we need only one argument. It is the request. So request and now we have to add each of the requests into the request queue. So request queue dot add and pass the request. Okay, now the singleton class is ready. Now we can add the request into the request queue. So go to background task.java. Here we already create the Json array request. Now we can add that one into the request queue. So my singleton dot get instance and pass the context. Here the context variable is context. Pass that context dot add it to request queue and pass the Json array request. Okay. Now the background task is ready. So within this background task we create a variable method called getList, and that method return an array list. Now go to displaylist.java. Now here we can initialize the adapter. So now initialize, create an object of the background task class. Background task equal to new background task, and pass the context displaylist.this. Now get the list from that method. So for that we create an array list that contains some objects of contact class. I name it as array list equal to new array list. So now array list equal to background task dot get list. Now by using this array list we can initialize the adapter. Adapter equal to new recycler adapter, and pass the array list. Now set adapter for recycler view dot set adapter, and pass the adapter. Okay, and that's it. Now we finish the coding. Now we can test this application. So run it. Select a virtual device. Here I use a Genymotion virtual device. Okay, now the application available on this virtual device, and here is the data available on the remote database, name and email. Now we are going to display this data on our recycler view. Okay, now the data available on the recycler view. So this is how we made a simple JSON array request using Volley. Thank you for watching.